Hello and welcome, everybody. Today we're talking about being boring, which is a subject that I have an extraordinary amount of experience in. Or maybe we're talking about being seen as being boring, accepting being boring. There's a part of me, it's kind of like an inner child or some vulnerable part of me that throughout my life, whenever people greet me by saying something like, Miles, just the same old going on in your world? Or Miles, nothing new and exciting going on in your life? This part of me, when people say that, it freaks out. It gets like angry and defensive. And on the surface, I probably just kind of like am a little bit cagey and like not very responsive to that comment. But on the inside, there might not be a lot going on the surface of my life. It might actually look like there's nothing new and exciting going on, or that it's just the same old, same old. But the way that this part of me experiences life, there's never a time when it feels like the same old, same old. That just doesn't happen because every day is this miraculous thing, this extraordinary new journey. That's how this part of me feels. And so I guess when someone asks, like, says, there's nothing new and exciting in your world, it feels like it has to push that away because it's so far from my reality. It's like, no way, that is not true. There's always something new and exciting. But on the surface, sure, there's nothing happening. There's nothing for me to tell you that's news. And over the years, I've kind of just like noticed this really strong defensive reaction. And I think a part of it is insecurity because on the surface of my life, there are periods that have been superficially boring or monotonous or mundane. And I'm in one of those periods right now. For the last 4 years, I've worked the same job. I go for the same walk a lot of days. I spend time writing. There's this real stability that's been happening in my life that's pretty unusual. And occasionally somebody will ask me, like, so Miles, what's going on? Just the same old, nothing new and exciting. And I've become capable of not getting really defensive and accepting that on the surface, maybe they're right. Maybe there's not much going on. Maybe it's just this kind of like slow burning, um, simple, boring life. But my interior experience, what's going on, like the way that I'm living it and feeling and perceiving and experiencing every day is filled with new magic. There's always this transformation and this change, but nobody can see it on the out, or very few would be able to see that on the outside. On the inside, it feels monumental. It feels like there's these transformations and these revelations and this beauty that's slowly something I'm becoming more intimate with. If I'm walking in nature, noticing things, opening up to the feeling of nature, in my relationships, being more present, being more loving, and in my relationship to myself, in my relationship to my dreams, whatever it may be, this boring, mundane life is like overflowing with newness and magic. And I think a good analogy would be something like a hug. A hug between two people is something that on the surface could be looked at as very mundane, very just a non-event, something that's just two people giving each other a hug. But there's a certain kind of hug that I have experienced in life occasionally where there's a hug which is happening on the surface, and then in the hug there's this like exchange of energy, or there's this chemistry, there's this love that gets exchanged between the two people hugging. And it's something that on the outside people wouldn't be able to see, but on the inside of it, it feels monumental. And maybe that's a kind of a metaphor for my life and how I've started to accept the boring, mundane nature of it over the past while. It's like, okay, maybe on the surface, when people ask me, there's nothing new and exciting going on in your world, Miles. Maybe that's a very understandable thing for them to say, given what they see on the surface. But on the inside of it, oh, it feels very new and exciting all the time because there's this presence to the experience. There's this beauty and richness in the stability, in the quote unquote monotony. It doesn't feel monotonous because there's this all of this love to be seen and shared and experienced. And where in the past I would feel very defensive and protective about that being seen and understood, I think I've started to slowly accept, like, oh, it's fine if people don't see that. It's fine if people don't understand that, because it's something you can't see. It's something you can't understand unless you're on the inside of it. And there's certain types of people, they're not that rare, but they're not everybody, who have a similar way of experiencing life, who just, for them, it's very reasonable to think that going for a walk in the woods or along the ocean or just listening to a record or writing or going to a job, that all of these things would be filled with extraordinary beauty and magic and revelation. There's certain people that are just like, oh yeah, of course, it's life. It's amazing. It doesn't need to be all fancy, and there doesn't need to be a ton of superficial stuff. There's this intimacy you can have with most experiences where you get this nectar out of them, and it doesn't need to be superficially flashy for that to happen. Not that there's anything wrong with doing superficially awesome, fascinating stuff. That's great. And there have been seasons of my life where that has been, more so the case. This season that I've been in for the past several years, like I said, it's probably been the most stable, boring part of my life in some ways. And it doesn't feel boring on the inside of it at all. And the stability, and it's like set up the groundwork for a lot of really beautiful things to happen. And feeling more committed to writing, more committed to like creating podcasts and other things of that nature. It all fits really well into living a very simple, boring life. And it's all extremely exciting. Extremely, extremely exciting. But everybody's wired differently. And to some people, my lifestyle would be like, they'd have an allergic reaction to it. It would be way too simple, way too minimalistic. And I think that's great. It's good to just accept that everybody's different on these levels. And the more that I have accepted where I'm at and not felt like I need to impress others on a superficial level to have something other than what feels right to me at this time, the more free I have felt. And it's a good feeling. It is a very good feeling. And I feel less defensive when someone says, so same old going on for you? I can just be like, yeah, well, kind of, but kind of not. Because there's two realities. There's the things that happen on the surface, and there's the way that I experience them or am present to them and everything that I'm feeling. And there's often a lot going on that level. And I think stability is sometimes underrated. Committing to periods of development and refining your craft or learning or just putting your head down and being focused for a period. I think that it can be underrated, and some of the greatest things come out of that. So that's where I've been at. Boring, but not boring at all. And I know that it's an experience that others can sometimes relate to. I have a lot of friends who are similar in that they live these incredibly rich lives, and yet they sometimes might feel self-conscious about it not really adding up in the way that other people superficially measure accomplishment or what's worthwhile or exciting or successful. And so I just wanted to speak to that today because I think there's a lot to be said about the depth of life that we don't see. And it's a very beautiful thing to acknowledge in ourselves, to acknowledge in others. And yeah, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, there are a variety of ways you can let me know. You can give this a like if you're watching on YouTube. You can also leave a comment and let me know what you think there. If you're streaming this on any streaming platform, you can subscribe to the podcast. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. And you can check out my book. There are links to it in the show notes or in the description. And until next time, have a beautiful day, everybody.